My uncle worked construction for 31 years. He died at 63. There was $11,000 in his savings account. He was on the job before the sun came up. He didn't call in sick. He didn't complain. He did everything you're supposed to do, kept his head down, put in the hours, lived below his means, and trusted that if you just worked hard enough for long enough, the math would eventually tilt in your favor. $11,000. 31 years. I sat with that number for a long time after his funeral, and the thing that broke me wasn't the number itself. It was the fact that it didn't surprise me, because I could name 6 other people with the same story. Different jobs, different cities, same ending. That's when I stopped seeing it as a personal failure and started seeing it for what it actually is: a system, a closed system, a loop that keeps producing the same outcome regardless of how hard the person inside it works. This is not going to be a motivation video. I am not going to tell you to grind harder. If effort alone was the answer, my uncle would have died rich. What I am going to do is show you the 5 specific mechanisms that keep low income self-reinforcing. Not vague concepts, not mindset advice, actual mechanisms, the kind you can identify, name, and dismantle one at a time. Most people trapped in the low-income loop are running at least 3 of these simultaneously. Some are running all 5 and genuinely cannot figure out why nothing changes no matter how hard they try. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly where you are inside the loop, and you'll know what to do about it. I'm Matt. This channel is about the mechanics of money, how it actually moves, who it moves toward, and what separates the people who build real financial stability from the people who spend a lifetime trying and never quite get there. If that's useful to you, subscribe. Let's get into it. Here's something almost nobody in personal finance will say out loud. The standard advice assumes you have the mental capacity to follow it. That assumption is wrong. Researchers at Princeton and Harvard studied the measurable cognitive effects of financial scarcity. What they found was not subtle. When your brain is preoccupied with genuine financial pressure, not "I wish I had more money" stress, but actual "I don't know how I'm going to cover this" stress, your effective cognitive performance drops by the equivalent of 13 IQ points. 13 points. That is identical to the impact of going 24 hours without sleep. It is the same cognitive penalty as functioning while clinically intoxicated. Think about what that means for a second. The system places you in conditions that tax your brain. Then it expects you to make sharp, long-term, clear-headed financial decisions in the exact domain causing the stress. You're being asked to solve a complex problem with a processor that's running at 60% capacity, because the problem itself is what's draining the processor. That is not a character flaw. That is a trap with a mechanism. And the mechanism doesn't stop there. When you are poor, everything costs more. You can't buy groceries in bulk, so you pay a higher unit price. You can't afford the dentist for a $150 cleaning, so you wait until the tooth needs a $1,400 root canal. You can't make the car insurance deposit, so you pay the monthly plan that costs $200 more per year. The system levies a continuous surcharge on your lack of capital. Do you know your actual cost per unit on the things you buy most often? Most people have never calculated it. Run those numbers before you sleep tonight. So how do you break this first mechanism? You do not start by investing. You do not start by building wealth. You start by building a buffer. A small, separate, untouchable account with $500 to $1,000 in it. That money is not there to grow. It is not there to impress anyone. It is there for one specific purpose: to convert emergencies back into inconveniences. When your car breaks down and you have that buffer, it costs you money, but it doesn't cost you your cognitive bandwidth for the next 3 weeks. That $800 doesn't just fix the car. It buys back your ability to think straight. It buys back your ability to plan ahead. It is the highest return investment available to someone starting from nothing, and almost no one talks about it that way. Build the buffer first. Drain the swamp before you try to build anything on top of it. Now, and this is where it gets harder, once you have the buffer, you run straight into the second mechanism. I call this the consumption anesthetic. When you are living under chronic financial stress, your cortisol levels stay elevated. Your nervous system is in a low-grade fight or flight state, sometimes for years. Your brain is screaming for relief, and the fastest, most accessible source of relief your environment offers is purchase. You buy the new shoes, you order the food instead of cooking, you upgrade the phone 2 years early, and for about 45 minutes, the pain actually does go away. Your brain releases dopamine. You feel like you matter. You feel like you have some control over your life. This is not irresponsibility. This is self-medication, and it works, temporarily. Nobody in the history of mankind has looked at a credit card statement and thought that was worth it, yet here we all are. The problem is structural. The relief is short, the debt is long. And while you are servicing the debt from the last dopamine purchase, you are also running out of runway for the next financial emergency, which brings the cortisol back up, which makes the next purchase feel even more necessary. Round and round. The only exit from this mechanism is a deliberate reset. Not forever, a defined period, 3 to 6 months where you strip your spending down to essentials: food, shelter, transport. You cancel the subscriptions, stop eating out, stop buying things you don't need. It will be boring. Your brain will complain loudly. Your friends might say things that make you feel like you're overreacting. But something happens after about 6 weeks of this. Your brain stops expecting the dopamine from purchasing and starts finding it somewhere else. It finds it in the savings number going up, and that is a completely different kind of reward signal, because the thing you bought is already in a drawer somewhere depreciating. Once you stop needing the purchase to feel okay, you have broken something the entire consumer economy was built to keep intact. You have become, in a very specific way, harder to control. But here's where it gets even harder, because what you do with your time is about to become just as important as what you do with your money. Most people are given the same equation when they're growing up. Time equals money. Work more hours, earn more money. If you want to get ahead, get a second job, pick up overtime, find extra shifts. This is not wrong. It is just catastrophically incomplete, and the part they leave out is the part that keeps people poor. Time is finite. You have 168 hours in a week. Subtract sleep, basic self-maintenance, commuting, and you're working with maybe 60 to 70 usable hours. That is your ceiling. No matter how hard you work, how motivated you are, how many alarms you set, you cannot get past it. Your income, if it is entirely dependent on your hours, is mathematically capped. Now here is the part nobody talks about at the kitchen table. Your expenses are not capped. Prices rise continuously, not dramatically every year, but persistently. The cost of rent, food, fuel, insurance, these move upward on a schedule that has nothing to do with your salary negotiations. Wages, on the other hand, are what economists call sticky. Your employer adjusts them slowly, reluctantly, and usually well after inflation has already done its damage. You work the same hours next year as this year, but everything you buy costs more, and your paycheck hasn't caught up yet. You run harder. You end the year behind. And that is not a motivation problem. That is arithmetic. So you cannot work your way out by working more. You have to change what you're selling. Stop selling time, start selling value. Here's how. You build a skill stack. Most people try to escape low income by becoming the very best at one thing. The best welder, the best coder, the best salesperson. That path is expensive, takes years, and puts you in direct competition with everyone else trying the same thing. The alternative is counterintuitive, but it works. Become genuinely good, not world-class, just solidly competent at 2 or 3 skills that aren't usually combined. Then put them together. A warehouse worker who learns basic data analysis is no longer just a warehouse worker. They are the person who can look at the picking patterns and tell management where they're losing 12 hours a week. That skill combination doesn't have a lot of competition because most people in data analysis have never worked in a warehouse, and most warehouse workers have never touched a spreadsheet. You become a category of one. A customer service rep who learns copywriting is no longer answering phones. They are writing scripts that reduce call volume, drafting emails that actually get opened, building internal documentation that new hires can follow. The market pays for that combination because it is rare. Your base salary started at $14 an hour. Your combined skill set does not. The market does not pay for effort, it pays for rarity. If what you do can be replicated with 2 weeks of training, your rate is negotiable downward. If what you do requires a combination that takes years to accumulate, you are no longer a commodity, you are a specialist. Specialists are hard to replace. Ask yourself right now, what is one skill adjacent to what you already do that you could get genuinely competent in 6 months? Not expert, competent. What would that combination make you worth in the market? And the time to build that second skill is not after you have more money or more energy. The time is the monk mode period, when you have cut the spending, cut the noise, and reclaimed the 6 to 10 hours that were previously going nowhere. But there's a layer underneath all of this that we haven't touched yet, because you can have the buffer, the discipline, the skill stack, and still not escape if this next mechanism is working against you. There is a pattern that shows up repeatedly when you study people who successfully escaped low income, and it is almost never the first thing they credit. They credit the side hustle, the investment account, the turning point moment. But when you dig into the actual timeline, almost always the real inflection point was a change in their environment. Who they spent time with, what voices they were absorbing, what behavior was normal in their daily orbit. This is not a soft concept. This is neuroscience. Your brain contains mirror neurons, a system wired to subconsciously replicate the behavior, language, emotional patterns, and decision-making frameworks of the people around you. This process is not optional. It is not something you can willpower your way out of. You absorb the average of your environment the same way you absorb a language, gradually, without noticing, until it becomes how you think. If your daily environment has normalized financial helplessness, if the dominant narrative around you is that the system is rigged, that nothing ever changes, that ambition is naive or pretentious, your brain will eventually accept that as the baseline reality. Not because you're weak, because that is how mirror neurons work. They are designed to keep you synchronized with your tribe. And here's the part that makes this mechanism especially difficult to break. The moment you start doing something different, the people around you will feel it. When you start the monk mode period, cut the spending, pick up the new skill, decline the weekend plans because you're using that time to build something, people who care about you will get uncomfortable. They will not necessarily know why, but they will push back. Why are you working so hard? Just relax. You think you're better than us now. The game is rigged anyway. What's the point? This is not malice. It is fear. Your movement highlights the possibility that they could move too, which converts inaction from an external limitation into a personal choice. People resist that, so they pull. You cannot fight this force directly. You cannot argue someone out of social gravity. What you can do is manage your inputs. You do not have unlimited mental real estate. The voices you allow to occupy it consistently, repeatedly over time shape your ceiling. That is simply true. So if you cannot change who you physically spend time with, you can change who you spend your mental hours with. Read the autobiographies of people who built what you want to build, not the highlight reel, the actual story, the years where nothing was working, the specific decisions they made, the frameworks they used to interpret setbacks. When you spend 100 hours inside the thinking of someone who successfully navigated the thing you're trying to navigate, something transfers. You begin to recognize patterns they would recognize. You begin to ask questions they would ask. You are choosing your inputs, and your inputs determine your average. The poverty loop stays intact partly because of what it does to your money and your time, but it also stays intact because of what it does to your sense of what is possible. Change the inputs. Watch the sense of possible start to expand. Now, all of that is the defensive work, the buffer, the discipline, the skills, the environment. That gets you out of the hole. What we haven't talked about yet is how you make sure you never fall back in. Here is the thing about compound interest that most people understand intellectually, but very few feel in their gut. It is not neutral. It does not sit still while you decide what to do about it. It is running right now in one direction or another, determined entirely by which side of a single line you are on. If you carry credit card debt at 22% annual interest, which is a completely normal rate and an absolutely brutal one, you are paying compound interest. Every day you do not eliminate that balance, it grows. Not because you spent more, not because anything happened, just because of the passage of time and the mathematics of the interest structure. You go to sleep, you wake up, and you are poorer than you were the night before, automatically. The people on the other side of that line, the people with assets in a broad market index fund or in real estate or in a business with consistent cash flow, wake up in the opposite condition. They go to sleep, the assets run, they wake up, and the number is slightly higher. Nothing required of them. The math just ran. This gap, the gap between paying compound interest and earning it, is the most consequential financial divide that exists. Not income level, not net worth, not education. Which side of compound you are on. So how do you cross the line? You do it in 3 stages, and you do them in order. Stage 1, kill the high interest debt first, before you invest in anything, before you build anything. The return on eliminating 22% credit card debt is 22%, guaranteed, risk-free. There is no index fund on earth that will give you that. Every dollar you put into the market while carrying 22% debt is costing you more than it is earning you. Eliminate the vampire before you try to build the garden. Stage 2, start the snowball. The amount does not matter as much as the consistency. $10 a day, not a dramatic number, not a life-altering sacrifice, invested consistently into a low-cost index fund. That is $3,650 per year. Over 30 years at historical average market returns, that becomes approximately $338,000. The math does not care whether you believe it. Do you know your current interest rate on every debt you carry? Not an estimate, the exact number. Look it up before you go to sleep tonight. That number is the first thing you need to know. Stage 3, escape velocity. This is the moment your assets generate enough passive income to cover your basic monthly costs. It does not have to be every cost, just survival, rent, food, transport, utilities. The moment those costs are covered by something other than your labor, you have crossed the threshold. You no longer have to sell your time to stay alive. You have options. You can take the lower-paying job that teaches you more. You can walk away from the toxic work environment. You can take a month to build something. That is what financial freedom actually means. Not luxury, not early retirement. Options. The ability to make a decision based on what you want rather than what you cannot afford to lose. My uncle never got there, not because he didn't work hard enough. He worked harder than almost anyone I have known. He just never had anyone show him the map.
Let's put the full picture together. You start with financial stress. The stress taxes your cognition, which leads to reactive decisions. The crisis handled expensively because you didn't have the buffer to handle it cheaply. The stress also drives the consumption anesthetic, purchases that feel necessary because they genuinely provide temporary relief from a nervous system that is chronically overloaded. The purchases create debt. The debt feeds the stress. You are now more cognitively depleted and deeper in the hole. Meanwhile, you are working harder to compensate. More hours, more jobs, more effort. But you have hit the time ceiling and inflation is running faster than your wages. More effort produces flat or declining purchasing power. And the people around you have normalized this outcome to the point where ambition starts to feel naive. Underneath all of it, compound interest is running against you every single night. That is the low-income loop in full. It is not a character flaw. It is not a cultural failing. It is a set of interlocking mechanisms, each one reinforcing the others, that produce predictable outcomes regardless of how hard the person inside them works. And here is the part that matters most. The mechanisms are breakable. Not all at once, not without cost or difficulty, but they have specific structures, and specific structures have specific points of leverage. Build the buffer. It is not glamorous, but it is the first intervention that actually changes what your brain can do. Break the consumption cycle, not permanently, just long enough for your reward system to recalibrate. 6 months of radical reduction will change your relationship to money in ways that no amount of reading will. Stack the skills. Stop trying to be the best at one thing in a crowded field. Find the combination that makes you rare. Manage your inputs. You cannot think differently if every voice around you is confirming the same ceiling. Choose who occupies your mental hours as carefully as you choose your calendar. And cross the compound line. Kill the high-interest debt first. Then start the snowball. $10 a day, consistently. Then let the math run. Most people who watch this will feel a moment of clarity right now. A sense that the picture finally makes sense. That the thing they have been fighting has a name and a shape. That moment is real. What happens in the next 48 hours is where it either takes hold or dissolves back into the default. The poverty loop does not persist because it is powerful. It persists because it is familiar.
your brain will try to return to it the way water returns to the lowest available point. The work is not a single decision. It is a direction, held under friction for long enough that the new pattern becomes the default. My uncle never got that information. The question I keep coming back to is not whether this is possible. The question is, how many more people are going to die with $11,000 in the bank before we decide it is worth talking about honestly? Where are you inside this loop right now?